Hi, this is Bob Miles. Over the years, much has been written and said about John Lennon. Most accounts relate his beginnings as a member of the Beatles and his somewhat offbeat lifestyle. On these sides, you'll hear in his own voice the feelings, observations, and real truth about himself, his wife Yoko, his music, and his lifestyle. What is most incredible is that this interview took place only hours before his death. It was recorded on December 8, 1980, about 12 hours before the shooting. The setting is an office in his New York record label, Geffen Records. John and Yoko began with a discussion of their recently completed double fantasy album.
I was possessed by this rock and roll devil, you know. Suddenly I got the songs, you know, just suddenly, like had, if you pardon the expression, diarrhea of creativity. And in fact, we went in the studio and cut about 22 tracks and cut it down to 14 to make the dialogue. They were all dialogue songs, meaning that we were writing as if it was a play and we were the two characters in it, but it's real life, but not real as well, because on a song or a record, it can't be real. I mean, we could have taken it a step further and made this record so maybe she would be called Ziggy Stardust and I would be called Tommy. And then you would call it a rock opera, you see? But we always worked from our own selves as near as we could. So the album, the work we did on this thing is really a play, but we're using ourselves as the characters. And what we sing about in the record and the songs are real diaries of how we feel. But also, it's always not really, really real, because it's a song and it's on a record and you project it in a different way. We had discussed going back in the studio, but I didn't have the material, but I wasn't worried about it, because I thought, well, I haven't done it for a long time. Maybe if I switch into that, there'll be something there. But it just sort of came. And I called her, because I was in Bermuda with Sean, and she was here in New York. And I called her and I said, well, look, we were talking about recording. It must have triggered something off here, because I'm getting all this stuff. And I started singing it to her down the phone or playing a cassette. And she would call back 2 hours later and say, well, when you sang that, Losing You, or she'd come back with Moving On or something. And then I'd say, oh, Moving On, okay. And then I'd be swimming or doing anything. Suddenly something else would come, like starting over. I'd say, hey, well, look, this is what happened. And it started working, like, coming out like that. So then I couldn't wait to get back and start then. I suddenly had all this material. After not really trying, but not trying either for 5 years. I'd been so locked in the home environment and completely switched my way of thinking that I didn't really think about music at all. My guitar was sort of hung up behind the bed, literally. And I don't think I took it down in 5 years. It inspired me completely. As soon as she would sing something to me or play the cassette down the phone, I would, within 10 or 15 minutes, whether I wanted to work or not, if you call it work, I would suddenly get this song coming to me. And I always felt that the best songs were ones that came to you rather than... I do have the ability to, you know, if you ask me to write a song for a movie or something, and they say it's about this, I can sit down and sort of make a song. I wouldn't be thrilled with it, but I can make a song like that. But I find it difficult to do that, but I can do it. You know, I call it craftsmanship, you know. I've had enough years at it to sort of put something together, but I never enjoyed that. I like it to be inspirational from the spirit. And being with Sean and switching off from the business sort of allowed that channel to be free for a bit. You know, it wasn't always on. It was switched off, and when I sort of switched it on again, zap, all this stuff came through. So now we're already, well, we did enough material for the next album, almost half as much, and we're already talking about the third album, so we're full of vim and vigor. Sometimes you think, wow, yeah, great, this is great, we've done it. And then the next time you hear it, well, she's not quite the same as I'll think, no, this is not right, it's not right. Yeah. So I would go yay and nay on it all the time. But I think, basically, we thought, if people will listen to it for what it is and not listen to it with preconceived ideas of how it ought to be or as compared to something else, then if people could listen to it just as if it wasn't even John and Yoko, just that it came over the radio and you accept it or not accept it as you hear it, not as you expect to hear John Lennon or expect to hear Yoko Ono or expect to hear an ex-Beatle or expect to hear whatever, or having read a good review or a bad review. Forget about that. Just get it on the radio I thought, and it'll be all right. I was taking Sean and the nanny and the family to a little, except for Mother, who was here selling cows, in Bermuda to the Botanical Gardens for lunch, to the Italian restaurant, because I could get espresso and Sean could get some junk food. And I was just walking in, I looked down, and it was a botanical garden, and it said, we're in the office, folks, that's why it's buzzing. It said, Frisia, Double Fantasy. And it was some flowers. And I just thought, Double Fantasy, that's a great title. Because it has so many meanings that you couldn't even begin to think what it means. So it means everything you can think of. I mean, it's a double couple. It's real life, but it's still a fantasy because it's now in plastic and in photograph. And it's fantastic. And it's just it sort of seemed to be perfect for a title of the album. And there's two of us. And it just sort of says it all somehow without really saying anything. It says everything. And it's a flower, actually.
The discussion now takes a turn from the artist John Lennon to the man and daddy John Lennon. Indeed, during the late 70s, John had all but forsaken his music to concentrate on being a husband and father.
Even as I put it in my last incarnation, everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. It means really that, you know, one cannot be absolutely oneself in public because the fact that you're in public makes you have to have some kind of defense or whatever it is. But we always tried, from whether it's from Two Virgins through Imagine, through anything we've done together, the films we made together, always tried to get as near to the uncensored, as it were, for what we are, not to project an image of something that we're not. Because having been in that sort of pop business so long and tried to retain myself throughout it, but obviously not always being successful at that, it was most uncomfortable when I didn't feel I was being myself. You know, when I would have to smile when I didn't want to smile. And it became like all that, like being a politician, you know. And what I really got through this 5 years is I'm not running for office. I like to be liked. I don't like to offend people. I would like to be a happy, contented person. I don't want to have to sell my soul again, as it were, to have a hit record. I've discovered that I can live without it, and it makes it happier for me. But I'm not going to come back in and try and create a persona who would not be myself. He was born on October the 9th, which I was, so we're almost like twins. You know, the funny thing, if he doesn't see me a few days, or if I'm really, really busy, you know, and I just sort of get a glimpse of him, or if I'm feeling depressed, without him even seeing me, he sort of picks up on it, and he starts getting that way. So it's like I can no longer afford to have artistic depressions, which usually produced a miserable song, but it was something I could use, you know. So if I start going really deep, sort of wallowing in a depression, I kind of enjoy it or whatever one does with them, the best you can, he'll start coming down with stuff, you know, so I'm sort of obligated to keep up. But sometimes I can't because something will make me depressed and there's no way I can deal with it. And then he's sure as hell he'll get a cold or trap his finger in the door or something will happen, you know. And so now I have a sort of more reason to stay healthy and bright. I cannot no longer wallow in it and say, well, this is how artists are supposed to be, I suppose, you know, write the blues, you know. A boy was really programmed to go in the army. That was about it, you know. And you had to be tough, and you're not supposed to cry, and you're not supposed to show emotion. And I know Americans show more emotion and more open than English people, but it's pretty similar over here. There's that Calvinist, Protestant, Anglo-Saxon ethic, which is don't touch, don't react, don't feel. And I think that's what screwed us all up. And I think it's time for a change. I took the time. Any famous star or whatever it is where you come under, and I'm not going to name any names, but many of them that have problems with their kids, either killing themselves or in various ways. I don't buy that bit about, you know, quality over quantity. You know, like an hour a week of intense rolling in the hay together is better than, you know, 20 minutes every day of you being bitchy and just being yourself around him. So I don't try and be the God Almighty kind of figure that never is always smiling and such this wonderful father. I'm not putting out an image of this person who knows all about... Nobody knows about children. That's the thing. You look in the books, there's no real experts. Everybody's got a different opinion. You learn by default in a way. And I made a lot of mistakes already, but what can you do? But I think it's better for him to see me as I am. If I'm grumpy, I'm grumpy. If I'm not, I'm not. And if I want to play, I'll play. If I don't, I don't. I don't kowtow to him. I'm straight with him as I can be. And yes, I can afford to take the time, but anybody with a working wife might be able to afford to take the time if they're not really got a working wife because they're poor and they both have to work. But I know lots of dads who aren't working that hard, who are just sitting in an office all day anyway to avoid life, you know. I mean, they're sitting behind desks and they're doing nothing, just shuffling paper, right, waiting for lunchtime to get a cocktail. But I don't buy that, you know, my career is so important that I'll deal with the kids later a bit, which I already did with my first marriage, my first child, and I kind of regret it. My other son by my first marriage is 17. I don't remember seeing him as a child. It didn't even enter, like most guys are 24, 25. They're too intent on their career, really. Well, Yoko was a poor artist when I met her, okay? And living in not the best conditions. And she had a child, and the child went wherever she went. She took her on stage, you know, I mean, a little squirking thing on the... And she would take her when they were making movies, because I saw, before we got together, I've seen her work and the way she worked, and the Kyoko was running around all over the place. And there are many artistically inclined people that have worked like that in the past, not since the 60s, but in the 30s and any other time. So even if I was poor, it's the state of mind I'm in. I would work out some way for him to be around us somehow, okay? I would have chosen my career to suit that. You don't have to be rich to love your kids. I learned a lot from the child, because they're not hypocrites and they're not phony, and they know when you're I mean, he knows already, you know. I mean, already he makes me feel, you know, anybody with a child that spent any moment with them, you know, and it's good for you, I think, because one does tend to fool oneself, and the kids don't buy it. Because I hadn't been in the studio for 5 years or whatever, so he's used to me being around all the time. Because it's a pleasure for me to hang around the house. I was always a homebody. I mean, I think a lot of musicians are, you know, you write and you play in the house anyway. Or when I was wanting to be a painter when I was younger, it was all in the house, or write poetry, it was always in the house. But I started the work, you know, and he started seeing a bit less of me. I'd let him come to the studio, but it was a bit boring. He was excited, but long story short, at the end of the session, and it was going on, I got back on a night schedule where I'd be coming in when he'd be getting up. So he'd see me at breakfast, but I was a sort of shredded, okay, what? Oh, like that. And then one day we were sort of lying down on the bed together, so I'm maybe watching some cartoon or whatever. And he just sat up and said, you know what I want to be when I grow up? And I said, no, what's that? He looked me right in the eye and said, just a daddy. And I thought, mm-hmm. I said, you mean you don't like it? That I'm working now, right? And going out a lot. He says, right. I said, well, I'll tell you something, Sean. It makes me happy to do the music. I might have more fun with you if I'm happier, right? He said, mm-hmm.
John was about 15 and Paul McCartney 13 years old when they first met. John talked about meeting McCartney for the first time and knowing almost immediately that this was the man he wanted for a partner.
I was saying to somebody the other day, there's only 2 artists I've ever worked with for more than one night stand, as it were. That's Paul McCartney and Yoko Ono. I think that's a pretty damn good choice. Because in the history of the Beatles, Paul met me the first day I did Bebopaloola live on stage, okay? And a mutual friend brought him to see my group called the Quarrymen. And we met and we talked after the show, and I saw he had talent, and he was playing guitar backstage and doing 20 Flight Rock by Eddie Cochran. And I turned around to him right then on first meeting and said, do you want to join the group? And he said, And I think he said yes the next day, as I recall it. Now, George came through Paul, and Ringo came through George, although, of course, I had a say in where they came from, but the person I actually picked as my partner, who I recognized had talent, and I could get on with, was Paul. Now, 12, or however many years later, I met Yoko. I had the same feeling. It was a different field, but I had the same feeling. So I think as a talent scout, I've done pretty damn well.
As dramatic as the meeting with Paul McCartney was, it was another encounter that would radically change John Lennon's outlook on life. It was 1966 at a gallery in London. John was about to meet a young artist named Yoko Ono, and he would also be coming to terms with her unusual artworks, something for which his boyhood years in Liverpool had not prepared him.
It was sort of 1966, and I got a call from a guy called John Dunbar, who used to be married to Marion Faithfull. You know, everybody's connected. And he had a gallery in London called Indica Gallery, an art gallery. And I used to go there occasionally to see whatever art show was on, you see. And he said, oh, I've got this, there's this fantastic Japanese girl coming from New York, and she's going to do this other thing, but she's also going to put on an exhibition at my gallery. And it's going to be this big event, something about black bags. And I thought, ooh, orgies, you know. You know, these artists, they're all ravers. You know, it was in the days of happenings and paint and all that stuff, right? So, I go right down there, you know, for the opening. Goody, goody, you know. Goes down, see what's happening. I get down there, and it's the night before the opening. I thought there was going to be a big party and an opening and the whole bit, you know, a big I didn't want to get involved. I wanted to watch, you know. I get there, it's all white and quiet, and there's just these strange things all on display, like an apple on a stand for £200, when the pound was worth $8 or something, or whatever. And there's hammers and saying hammer and nail, all this very peculiar stuff, and a ladder with a painting on the sky. Or it looked like a blank canvas on the ceiling with a spyglass hanging from it. So I'm looking around, and there doesn't seem to be many people. There's a couple of people downstairs, and I didn't know who was who. So I get up the ladder, and I look through this spyglass, and it said yes. And I took that as a personal positive message, because most of the avant-garde artists of that period were all negative, you know, like break a piano with an axe. It was mainly male. I'm looking at the female here. It was mainly male art, and it was all destructive and you know. But here was this little crazy message on the ceiling. And then the guy introduced me to her, and she didn't know who the hell I was. She had no idea, you know. She was living in a different environment altogether. And I was saying, well, I thought, this is a good con, isn't it? Apples for £200 and hammer and nail. Who's going to buy this, you know? I didn't know what concept art was, which in a nutshell is the idea is more important than the object. So that's why you won't see many rich concept artists around, because you can't really, you know, like the guy that wraps up what's the guy that wraps up the... Christo wraps up things. Well, he doesn't expect you to buy the canvas. What he's doing is selling you this idea, whatever it is he's projecting. It was the same kind of thing, but I hadn't come across it before. I said, how do you sell a nail and a hammer, you know? So anyway, I said, the gallery owner was all fussing around. He was thinking, well, is he going to buy something? And she's ignoring me, you know. So he introduced us, and I said, well, where's the event, you know, where's the happening? Because I'd seen the bag. So she just takes a card out and gives it to me and just says, breathe. So I said, you mean that? She said, you got it. I said, all right, I'm beginning to catch on here. So I see the hammer hanging on the thing with a few nails underneath. I said, well, can I at least hammer a nail in? You know, I've come all the way from the suburbs for this. And she says, no. So anyway, the gallery owner has a little word with her, and she says, she comes over to me and she says, all right, there's no smiling or anything, because you know how she is. She's not running for office. She never was, so she looks at me and she says, you give me 5 shillings. Give me 5 shillings and you can hammer a nail in. So I looked at her and I said, I'll give you an imaginary 5 shillings and hammer an imaginary nail in, okay? And that's when we connected really, and we looked at each other like, you know, that sort of, something went on. Well, I didn't see her again for a few weeks. We went to a Klaus Oldenburg opening, and we were all, I went with Paul, and I don't know who she was with, but I got separated from Paul, and I felt this sort of vibe behind me. And I looked round, and there she was, you know. And we were both very shy, believe it or not, and I don't know what I said. We said something. We didn't really get together till 18 months later. We didn't make love till 2 years. We knew, you think we're rock and rollers, you know, all the life that people lead. I really, really needed to be with her, wanted to be with her, and could not literally survive without her as a functioning human being. I just went to pieces, and I didn't realize that I needed her so much. I needed her more than she needed me, and I always thought the boot was on the other foot, you know, and that's as honest as I can get. And the image is always because the pop star, and Burt Reynolds said it, and God bless him, that the women have always kicked him out. And Yoko kicked me out. I didn't go off on I'm going to be a rock and roll bachelor. She literally said, get out. You know, and I said, okay, I'm going. You know, I'm going bachelor free. I'd been married all my life. You know, I'd been married before Yoko, and I immediately married Yoko, so I'd never been a bachelor since I was 20 or something. So I thought, It was god-awful. Another thing I want to say about Burt Reynolds, Barbara Walters asked him, what do you want to be remembered as? And he said, the best father that ever was, yeah. And I thought, thank God, you know, I began to feel maybe I'm the only father that's interested in relating, and is it going to become, oh, John Lennon's now selling this family business, and he's been through peace and love, and now he's coming on like daddy and all that. And I'm only talking about it because that's what I've done and that's how I feel. And admitting that it is that I'm more feminist now than I was when I sang Woman is the Nigger. I was intellectually a feminist then, but now I feel as though at least I've put my body where my mouth was and tried to really live up to my own preachings, as it were. And to see somebody like Burt Reynolds, who is the world's #1 male star over all the pop stars worldwide, to have the guts to say he wants to be known as a father, I thought, oh, great, I'm not going to be alone on this one.
Almost from the start, John and Yoko experimented with sound as art, staying up all night, howling and making strange noises into a tape recorder. The resulting collage of unusual sounds went into an album called Two Virgins. Some of the recording techniques they used, as well as public reaction to the nude photos on the cover of that album, are what we hear next.
I used to have a place where I worked in the house again, upstairs, in my first incarnation with my other wife and kid. And I used to make kind of freaky music at home. And you would hear it coming through on things like Tomorrow Never Knows on Revolver, or Rain and some little backwards things, but I never made that the whole track. I would take the sort of most usable and add it to the Beatles, or to my tracks of the Beatles, whether it was Walrus or Strawberry, or whatever, fiddle around a bit, or put loops, or, you know, something fun. But at home I was really far out, and I had a kind of little studio, which was really just a lot of tape recorders, and we made two versions that way. She came over for a date, as it were, and I didn't know what to do, and she didn't know what to do. I said, you know, I didn't know what to do with her, so I said, you want to go upstairs and play with the tapes? You know? So, because we didn't know what to do, we did play with the tapes all night. And we made two versions, and I was showing her all my different tape recordings and how I made the funny sound.
You're running around.
I was running around pushing buttons and playing the mellotron, and she started into the Yoko Ono stuff, which is now stuff you hear on B-52s, Lenny Lovitch and all that stuff. She started doing this, and all that, and I thought, this is great. And I was going on the tapes, and she was going, and we made a tape all night, and in the morning we made love as the sun came up. But we'd made this album's worth of sound together without consciously setting out to make something. And that was the first togetherness. And we shot the cover ourselves privately, and it wasn't, you know, we just got somebody to set the camera up, took the shot, and put out two versions. That was the start of the whole shebang. What are they doing? This Japanese witch has made him crazy, and he's gone bananas. But all she did was take the bananas part of me out of the closet more, you know, that had been inhibited by the other part. It was completely far out as I was, you know. We made two versions, and we weren't worried about commercial. We just wanted to put out, to share the thing. Some people accepted it, and a lot of people didn't, but the thing had an effect, the fact that, you know, an Elvis Presley would take his clothes off. Other shots for that cover, which made us look a lot more sexy and attractive. Believe me, you know, if you pose a certain way and you just do it like this.
Better.
And there were a couple more shots that later came out in the calendar with the Live Peace in Toronto album, where we look a little more attractive as a couple in a star kind of way. But we deliberately chose the one where we were standing there, you know, in all our glory, like a little flab around the waist, the legs a little, you know, nothing pretty about it. We're in love. We want to share it.
As John and Yoko worked together, loved together, and eventually married, the influence of their individual artistic abilities began to meld. Yoko got more into music. John experimented with film and painting. Overtones of politics became more recognizable in their works. As the turbulent 60s became more uncertain, themes such as Give Peace a Chance became national anthems for Vietnam protesters. Recorded during their first bed-in 1969 in a hotel room in Montreal, John and Yoko were determined to focus attention on themselves and thus on making love rather than war. It was also the debut record for the Plastic Ono Band. Here, John and Yoko discuss the interrelation of art, politics, communication, and love as it applied to those turbulent years.
Some of the ideas that she wanted both of us to do then, I must say I was more square then than I am now in a way, that I wish we'd done because now other people have done them because they, and I would say, no, I'm not going to do it. Are you kidding? I'm not doing that. You know, I would start reserving, you know. I don't want to do that, you know. We're in enough trouble as it is, you know, let's not do that. That was banned, Woman is the Nigger of the World, because of the word nigger. Now, I had Ebony and Jet both say they are not offended, and we went down there with Dick Gregory, and just in case there were any questions there. And the statement, Woman is the Nigger of the World, was made by Yoko in 1967 or 8 to an English woman's magazine called Nova, which was a kind of Vogue. And she was on the cover, and the title was Woman is the Nigger of the World. I immediately stole the title and wrote a song. It didn't come out till 71. And there was all this hullabaloo about the word nigger, but the hullabaloo was from the white community, you know, not from the black community. Schoenberg and Weyburn, she'd studied at Sarah Lawrence and all that. I didn't know any of that stuff, and she was turning me on to it. Even Bertolt Brecht. I knew it when we did Sometime in New York City. To me, we were doing a newspaper. So one would rush it out into print, you see. So there were mistakes, say a little harmony wasn't perfect. We didn't go back and perfect every note. We just printed it out, you know, and sometimes there's words missing or something like that. And it was later that she said, well, you know what we did there? I said, no, we got into a lot of trouble, that's all I know. And, you know, the harmony's funny or something, you know. Because we had her idea again. She had Chairman Mao and Richard Nixon dancing naked on the cover. It wasn't really their bodies, we just stuck their heads on. Well, the record company stuck a label on it in the supermarkets, and you couldn't even get it off when you went home, you know. And there was no genitals, nothing on it. But anyway, and I started getting down about that record thing. It was a mistake. Even though we tried to say something about women, we tried to say something about love and peace or whatever, the war, that, you know, we got into so much trouble. And so she then took me to see Richard Foreman's production of the Threepenny Opera of Bertolt Brecht, which I don't know when it was originally out, in the 20s or 30s. I said, oh, I see, so we're not alone, you know. I don't know what happened to Brecht when he first put that out, but it was the same idea, meaning, you know, to make a statement on the society right now, right away, and no BS. Just say it, you know, I think this is wrong, that's right, this is my opinion. Communicate is the thing. It's that need to communicate. Politics was in the air those days, come on, I mean, you know, you couldn't avoid it, right? And being artists, when we get into something, we get into it, you know what I mean? We want it to be right there, down on the front lines, you know, but as we always said to everybody, with flowers, but still right down there, you know, we want to go all the way with it. And I think we did go all the way with it too, you know, our intentions were good. Not only the fact that we got together and boom, it was like an explosion, but there was also the Beatle thing about us getting together and whether they split because of us or not, or whatever the reason, all that stuff. The Beatles were splitting, the Beatles were arguing, John and Yoko was getting together, the anti-Vietnam crusades were going on all over, and we were involved in so many things, and we were putting out so much work, and we were making movies, making public appearances, performing at shows and traveling the world and doing all that. There was no time to reflect. There was only time to put out immediate impressions of what was happening. That's why I refer to the word is love on Rubber Soul. Straight through to all you need is love, to give peace a chance, to imagine there's no countries, imagine no war, in other words, to write to this moment now. This album doesn't say imagine the whole world like that, because I've said that in a way. What I'm saying now is, now let's put the spotlight on the two of us and show how we're trying to imagine there's no wars, to live that love and peace, rather than sing about it only. Give peace a chance imagine is the same thing. You hit it right in the head. It's just imagine if there were no countries. Not no places where we each had our little spot. But imagine, there was a time, you know, when you didn't have to have a passport to go from country to country. What kind of world did we create? Really, it used to be you could go around, you know. What is this game that you can't get, that somehow this is America and then just across the field is Canada, and that you have to have all kinds of papers and pictures and stamps and passports, and the concept of imagining no countries, imagining no religion, not imagining no God. Although you're entitled to do that too. Imagining no denominations. Imagining that we revere Jesus Christ, Mohammed, Krishna, Milarepa equally. We don't have to worship either one, that we don't have to, but imagine there's no Catholic Protestant, no Jew Christian, that we allow it all, freedom of religion for real, I mean, for real.
The discussion turned to the Plastic Ono Band itself. More of a channel for creative expression than an actual band, it was a powerful means for the Lennons to air ideas and concepts into which they had gradually evolved.
This time they're ready for us, man. We can go on and do our stuff without even changing a thing. We could go on right back, and I dug out the old records we'd made. I dug out the B-52s, and then I talked to my assistant who tried to turn me on to them 18 months before, but I'd say, no, I'm not into the music now. I didn't want to hear anything. He was trying to play me Pretenders and Madness and all that stuff, and I didn't want to listen to it. And I said, give me some more of this. What's going on out there? He brought all this, you know, cookie, whatever you want to call it, stuff in, and we looked at each other and we thought, ha-ha. They finally caught up to what we were trying to do all the time, which is another form of expression. And we thought, this time, surely they're going to understand it. And here we are doing it. Again, it's not that much different from what we did. If you take the Plastic Ono Band albums, which are titleless, I call mine Mother for reference. It had Mother and God and a couple of tracks like that on. And her album, which was a same cover but a kind of reverse trick, the first track on her thing is called Why. You play that, and you play something modern now, and see if we weren't on the right track in 1969 and not. She doesn't like listening. She likes to either do or do something else.
Yeah,
I held her in the chair and said, listen to this rock lobster. Listen to this stuff. You know? But I wouldn't have done it if we hadn't done it together. That was the point which your insecurity makes you say that. But the fact is, if I couldn't have worked with her, I wouldn't have bothered. I wouldn't enjoy just putting an album out by myself, having to do this by myself, having to go to the studio by myself, because I've had the sort of, even though I was in a group, I've had that kind of game before. You know, I didn't want to work with another guy even. You know, the fact of man and wife working together and presenting ourselves as man and wife, not as a sexual object male, or her even separately as a sexual object female that sings love songs and is available to the audience. It's not that. We're presenting ourselves as a couple, and to work with your best friend is a joy, and I don't intend to stop it. If we hadn't had the success we'd had with this record, I would have been quite happy, because I know I can live without it.
The life and times of John Lennon were turbulent indeed. In 1968, his first wife, Cynthia, filed for divorce, claiming adultery. In 1969, an auto accident involving John, Yoko, and her daughter Kyoko made headlines, although no one was seriously injured. In 1970, London police closed an exhibition of John Lennon's erotic lithographs on obscenity charges. The charges were soon dropped. And in 1972, John's visa expired, setting off a 4-year battle in the federal courts, during which time he is threatened with deportation. The battle was won on July 27, 1976, when amid much public pressure from fans, fellow artists, and even from New York's Mayor Koch, the judge ruled that John Lennon could apply for U.S. citizenship and remain in the United States. Between 1975 and 1980, Lennon was conspicuously absent from the recording and music scene. His record company, Apple Records, was in trouble, and eventually went into receivership to be divided by the courts. The remaining Beatles each stayed in the public eye with record hits. In his first musical effort in nearly 5 years, John Lennon goes into a studio and comes out with Starting Over, a tune which crystallizes his career, his mental outlook on the world, and his rededication to the music he loved.
It's like the channels on the radio were jammed, you know. I was not getting clear signals. And after 10 or 15, almost 20 years of being under contract and having to produce two albums a year in the early days and a single every 3 months, regardless of what the hell else you were doing, or what your family life was like, what your personal life was like, nothing counted. You just had to get those songs out. Now, Paul and I turned out a lot of songs those days, and it was easier because it was the beginning of our relationship and career. Paul and I developed in public, as it were. We had a little rehearsal in private, but mainly we developed our abilities in public. But then it got to be format and sort of not the pleasure that it was, and that's when I felt that I'd lost myself. Not that I was on purposely being a hypocrite or a phony, but it took something away from what I set out to do. I started out to do rock and roll because I absolutely liked doing it. So that's why I ended up doing a track like Starting Over. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. You know, it's that, you know, it's sort of a la Elvis and that, and I hope people accept it like that. I think it's a serious piece of work, but it's also tongue-in-cheek, you know. I mean, I went right back to my roots. All the time we were doing it, I was calling it Elvis Orbison, you know, and it's not going back to being Beatle John in the 60s, it's being John Lennon, whose life was changed completely by hearing American rock and roll on the radio as a child, and that's the part of me that's coming out again, and that's why I'm enjoying it this time. I'm not trying to compete with my old self or compete with the young new wave kids or anything like that are coming on. I'm not competing with anything. I'm trying to go back and enjoy it as I enjoyed it originally.
Indeed, this evolution is what John described as a continuum of his work, rather than isolated periods such as a Beatle period or a post-Beatle period. It is an artist's objectivity about his work which makes him outstanding, and it is this type of objectivity which makes the Lennons so special as artists and as people.
We're not presenting ourselves as the perfect couple because we don't want to get into that bag either, right? Because we're trying to present what it is, you know, a relationship that lots of other people are having, but they're maybe not songwriters and they don't express it that way. And the letters we're getting back are from couples, apart from the kids who just like it as music. The main excitement is the letters from people who are married with kids, or not necessarily married, but relating together and realizing that we're not selling ourselves as the perfect couple. We have our problems. We've had our problems. No doubt we'll have problems. But, you know, we're trying. We want to stay together. We want to be a family. And that's the kind of level we're relating to. I am not aiming at 16-year-olds. If they can dig it, please dig it. But when I was singing and writing this and working with her, I was visualizing all the people of my age group from the 60s.
That's true.
Being in their 30s and 40s now, just like me, and having wives and children, and having gone through everything together, I'm singing to them. I hope the young kids like it as well, but I'm really talking to the people that grew up with me. I'm saying, here I am now. How are you? How's your relationship going? Did you get through it all? Wasn't the 70s a drag, you know? Here we are. Well, let's try and make the 80s good, you know? Because it's still up to us to make what we can of it. It's not out of our control. I still believe in love, peace. I still believe in positive thinking when I can do it. We all survived Vietnam or Watergate or the tremendous upheaval of the whole world that's changed. We were the hip ones in the 60s, but the world is not like the 60s anymore. The whole map's changed, and we're going into an unknown future, but we're still all here. We're still, wow, there's life, there's hope.
Starting Over was released only 5 weeks before John Lennon's life ended. His outlook was that the world should survive, and that music should enrich the mind, uplift the spirit, and reflect the times in which they were created.
I'm 40. I want to talk to the people my age. I'm happy if the young people like it, and I'm happy if the old people like it. I'm talking to guys and gals that have been through what we went through together, the 60s group that has survived the war, the drugs, the politics, the violence on the street, the whole shebang, that we've survived it, and we're here, and I'm talking to them. And the woman song is to Yoko, but it's to all women. And because my role in society, or any artist or poet's role, is to try and express what we all feel, not to tell people how to feel, not as a preacher, not as a leader, but as a reflection of us all. And it's like, that's the job of the artist in society, they're not some alienated being living on the outskirts of town. It's fine to live on the outskirts of town, but artists must reflect what we all are. That's what it's about, artists, or poets, or whatever you want to call it. And that's what I'm trying to express on behalf of all the men to all the women. Through my own feelings about women, when it dawned on me, you know, my God, it is the other half of the sky, as the late, great Chairman McDougall said, right? I mean, they are the other half of the sky, and without them there is nothing. And without us, there's nothing. There's only the two together. Creates children, creates society. So what's all this BS about, you know, women are this and men are that? We're all human, man. We're all human.
The years John had spent as a husband and father gave him an insight into the plight of women that few men experience. He advocated honesty in relationships between men and women, and detested the macho image that many men adopt as an alternative to communicating with women.
Well, isn't it time we destroyed it? Because where's it got us all these thousands of years? Are we still going to have to be clubbing each other to death? Do I have to arm wrestle you to have a relationship with you as another male? Do I have to seduce her or come on with her that I'm going to lay her because she's a female, or come on some sexual... Can we not have a relationship on some other level besides that same old stuff all the time? I mean, it's kid stuff, man. It's really kid stuff. And I don't want to go through life as pretending to be James Dean or Marlon Brando, you know? In a movie, not in real life, even in a movie version of them.
John and Yoko believed the internal resources which they tapped within themselves as artists are available to all of us as children of a greater universe. The Lennons were firm believers in positive brain power, setting and projecting of goals, and the need to dream of what might be.
What we were doing, you can call it magic, meditation, projection of goal, which business people do. They have courses on it. The footballers do it. They pray, they meditate before the game. They visualize themselves winning. Billie Jean King visualizes every move on the court. What we were doing, we were early pioneers of that movement, which is to project a future which we can have goals which we can reach, right? People project their own future. So what we wanted to do was say, let's imagine a nice future. She's right. The males like even Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, who produced 1984, you look into Orwell's life, it was all torture and this, that, and the other, and he was brought up in a certain environment in a male-dominated society full of Marxist stuff about Spain, and they were all from the whatever, that period when they had those dreams of socialism answering everything, right? And their dreams fell to dust after the war. And then they wrote these books projecting this horrific Big Brother, monsters controlled by robots. And even now, I think these people that project the space fantasies are projecting war in space continually, with women in miniskirts, available sexual objects, and the men with super macho John Wayne guns on their hips. I'm saying it's time for the people to get hip to that, man, because they're projecting our future. Do we want our children to be out in space, or grandchildren fighting, maybe not Russians, but Venusians in space? You see, if it works for a football player and a tennis player, it can work for all of us. We have to project a positive future. I mean, I think that's what Christ and Mohammed and those people were saying in their way, in their time, for their society. In retrospect, if I was trying to say that same thing again, I would say the people have the power. I don't mean power of the gun. They have the power to make and create the society they want. We all created this together. It wasn't a few kings or a few generals. We might have invested the power in a Napoleon, or the Germans might have been hypnotized by Hitler. Does that make the Germans different from the rest of the human race? No way. You know, it could have happened anywhere. It just happened there at that moment in time. Okay? And also, the world we do breathe in and we breathe out. So you go to the left, you go to the right. It's all, in the long term, it's meaningless. Even since I was conscious of politics, it was the right in the 50s, the left in the 60s, and sort of nothing in the 70s, and it's going to the right. If everybody's going to panic and just react to an illusionary right wing that's going to kill everybody, well, that's what you're going to get. I believe that it doesn't have to be like that just because the guy has a right wing or supposedly has a different political view than other people. Now, personally, I've never voted in my life. How do you like that? Now, there's a Beatles book that was handed out on the 1964 tour, a book of photographs, and on the top of it, it shows this young John Lennon in his usual big-mouth way saying, "No phony politician's ever going to get through to me." Well, I take the phony politician out because I don't think all politicians are phony. I won't categorize even politicians now because I've learned a lot since I was 23. But I don't think politics is the only answer, you see. I think this idea that we elect these leaders and then expect them to do miracles for us. Now, Kennedy is a big dream for everybody because he didn't live to fulfill or let us down. And it's not to negate what Kennedy was and what he means to people. But the reality is, had he lived, how do you know how well he would have done at the time, right? Or how the war would have gone and how everything would have gone. So investing leaders with supernatural powers, whether they be pop stars, politicians, or movie stars, or football heroes, it don't work. It just doesn't work. Because we put them up on the pedestal and immediately we want to knock them off. So Reagan's going to go in there. All the so-called rightists are all going to be waiting for him to do what they want. And when he doesn't, because it's impossible, because the presidency is such a vast, awe-inspiring position for any man to be in, and it means a lot more than some local right-left group, that he cannot possibly fulfill the dreams of the right wing, the same way as Carter or Kennedy could never fulfill the dreams of the left wing. People are believing in projecting their own power, visualizing goals, visualizing positiveness, and doing these things. It all takes time. You see, I think that the bit about, you know, the 60s, we're all full of hope, and then everybody got depressed, and the 70s were terrible. That attitude that everybody has, that the 60s was therefore negated for being naive and dumb, and the 70s is really where it's at, which means, you know, putting makeup on and dancing in the disco, which was fine for the 70s. But I don't negate the 60s, I don't negate the 70s. The seeds that were planted in the 60s, and possibly they were planted generations before, but the seed that whatever happened in the 60s, the flowering of that is in the feminization of society, the meditation, the positive learning that people are doing in all walks of life. That is a direct result of the opening up of the 60s. Now, maybe in the 60s we were naive, and like children, everybody went back to their room and said, well, we didn't get a wonderful world of just flowers and peace and happy chocolate, and it wasn't just pretty and beautiful all the time, and that's what everybody did. We didn't get everything we wanted, just like babies, and everybody went back to their rooms and sulked, and we're just going to play rock and roll and not do anything else. We're going to stay in our rooms, and the world is a nasty, horrible place because it didn't give us everything we cried for, right? Crying for it wasn't enough. The thing the 60s did was show us the possibility and the responsibility that we all had. It wasn't the answer, it just gave us a glimpse of the possibility. And the 70s, everybody's going, nyeh, 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 and possibly in the 80s, maybe everybody say, okay, well, let's project the positive side of life again. You know, the world's been going on a long time, right? It's probably going to go on a long time.
As he entered his 40s, John Lennon realized some fundamental changes in his attitudes were taking place. In this section of our interview, he describes this mellowing of attitude which accompanies maturity.
You don't get so emotionally up and down when you're older, because when you're younger, your genes are different, your hormones are different, so it absolutely has to express different. You can become mellower without becoming rigid. I'm still open to anything. I still believe almost in anything until it's disproved. I don't have any set pattern. I don't have any set answers. I'm as open as ever, but I just maybe not so... My hormones don't work the same, that's all. You know.
The conversation now came full circle, from his philosophy to music once again. As John Lennon evolved into a more positive human being, so was the music evolving. Lennon saw a positive development in that many musical styles and tastes were coming together to form the fabric of 80s music. Here he describes those various styles and his work on Double Fantasy.
If the oldies but goldies come on, it's one of my favorites. If I hear Bebop Lou, I can hear it over and over again. Every time it comes on, I switch up the thing, and I have the record still. If I hear Elvis, I heard him singing I Want You, I Need You, I Love You the other day. I mean, I was just in heaven. I know, of course I was going back to my youth and remembering the dates and what was going on when I heard that music. Bruce Springsteen's Hungry Heart, which I think is a great record, is, to me, it's the same kind of period sound as Starting Over. I think the Cars Touch and Go is right out of the 50s. That new wave, a lot of it is 50s stuff. But with the 80s styling, and that's what I think Starting Over is. It's a 50s song made with an 80s approach. I never believed that you can like rock or disco. I love disco right from word scratch, and all those complaints about it being all the same is exactly what I heard about Little Richard and Fats Domino. They couldn't tell the difference because the backing was always the same, the saxophones. But you could select from Fats Domino on which are the best tracks. Lucille as opposed to some one that we can't even remember, right? With the same kind of rhythm. Also, now disco is part of the music scene. it's integrated into the whole. It's affected country and western, it's affected pop, it's affected the ballads. It is now part of the music. New wave will be exactly the same. It's another wave that joins the ocean of music. You know, that was the thing about the Beatles. They never stuck to one style. They never just did blues or just rock. We loved all music. You know, did In My Life, Anna on the early things, and lots of ballady things, you know. My Image was more rocky, you know. But if you look down those Beatles tracks, I'm right there with all the sentimental, just the same as Paul or anybody else. I love that music just as much. I'm so hungry for making records because of the way I feel. I want to make some more records before a tour, so I'd like to make at least one more album before actually just making that final decision of calling those very expensive session musicians and taking them on the road, you know? But when I went in there, I had no intention of going live, because I've noticed a lot of people like Clash and things like that don't do any personal appearance hardly anymore, and they just make a video on the record. And so part of me would think, oh, all right. But when we were playing in that studio, and then I don't know whether it was Tony, the bass player, or the drummer, after we'd done Starting Over, he said, can we do this again? I mean, let's take it on the road. And that was the first time it came. I thought, my God, this would be fun, wouldn't it? And if we can do it in the way we've done the album, which is have fun, enjoy the music, enjoy the performance, be accepted as John and Yoko, then I'd be happy to go out there.
For John Lennon, the violence and inhumanity towards fellow human beings which he and Yoko had spent much of their lives trying to prevent was the very violence he encountered on December 8th, 1980. In the minds and hearts of his fans worldwide, he will always symbolize love and peace. It was this statement in the interview which best sums up John Lennon's view of his work. Here he relates using sound on two songs, Mother, recorded in 1975, and Starting Over, recorded in 1980, to show the onward progress of his work and his survival into the 80s.
The beginning of Mother, the Plastic Ono album, you hear this litany, boom, you know, very slow church bell, which was like a don't believe in and the Freudian things about mother and father. And that was a kind of negative positive. I was trying to make a positive out of a negative, but it was heavy going. And the reason this one goes ting, ting, is to show that I've come through. And whoever's listening must have come through or they wouldn't be here. And that's because I always consider my work one piece, whether it be with Beatles, David Bowie, Elton John, Yoko Ono, and I consider that my work won't be finished until I'm dead and buried, and I hope that's a long, long time. So to me, it's part of one whole piece of work from the time I became public to now. And that's the connecting point between that. And the 80s, it's like we got a new